Ladies and gentlemen, kindly be informed that Ibu Dr. Vivi Sulaswati from this moment replaced with Bapak Pungki from Ministry of National Development Planning, Republic of Indonesia.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أفضل المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I'm honored to be given this opportunity to moderate this session today alongside with the very distinguished guest. And on behalf of IDB Group, I would like to welcome the guest to this important panel discussions in conjunction with the upcoming IDB Group 41st annual meeting, which is taking place in this very beautiful city. The topic of today's panel discussion is the role of Islamic finance in achieving SDGs, global perspective. Basically, in these sessions, we are going to hear from our distinguished panelists, how can Islamic finance play a role to support the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. SDG, as we know, was recently launched during the United Nations Summit in September 2015. It's a very ambitious yet challenges with 17 goals and 169 targets. And as you may know, the Millennium Development Goals, which concluded and being replaced by the SDG, although to a certain extent achieved the desired goals, but we can still witness a lot of major issues still persisting. For example, and as quoted in the United Nations reports, the income gap between the rich and poor is still widening. 1 in 5 people still lacks access to modern electricity. 860 million people are still live in extreme poverty. 828 million people are still live in slums, and the number in rising trend. Rising tension of the humanitarian and migrant crisis further add to the accumulating issue at hand. Islamic finance, on the other hand, is a financial system based on certain values guided by the principle stated in the Holy Quran and the Sunnat Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, the Hadith. It's argued that Islamic finance is able to provide solution to the existing economic crisis. It promotes social justice, risk sharing, and all activities are linked to the real economic activities. In addition, Islamic social finance, i.e. zakat, waqf, sadaqah, are among the instruments which preserve human dignity and alleviate hardcore poverty. IDB recently had made a quick study on the role of Islamic finance and SDGs. And we found out of the Islamic financial instruments that we are existing today and we are implementing in the industry today, easily are able to support at least 15 out of 17 SDGs. We will give the floor first to Dr. Bunky to give us a short presentation about the role of Islamic finance and in achieving the SDGs, and then we'll come back to our panelists to raise a couple of questions and to open the floor later for our audience. Please.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for Islamic Development Bank and IRTI to invite me for this very important event. Actually, what I would like to say that actually, if we can go to the presentation, is that Islamic finance is very important in supporting the government agendas on SDGs because it has a very huge potential. In Indonesia, for example, if you go to the next slide, please, we just decided to establish just like the National Committee on Sharia Financial System. And then this committee actually has an agenda to improve all the aspects of Islamic finance, for example, how to improve the capital market, banking system, things like that, so that we believe that the recommendations to improve the Sharia financial system is being consistently done. We are going to have about 145 billion US dollars new sources within the next 5 years. And in this source, actually, we can really use some funds to support the SDGs programs. So that's why actually what I can say is that if we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah. What we can see is that actually out of this money, there are lots of opportunities to support Islamic SDGs. The problem is that actually how we can design the SDGs activities so that it can tap the Islamic financial resources here. So what I can share in the next slide is that, for example, next slide, please. What I can share is that actually banking and capital market is actually some tools of financing development. So either it is a conventional or Sharia market, is that it's actually to players, this is actually the same. Now, commercial values are actually identical to market operational values. So whether private entities are working on food projects, for example, or housing development projects, things like that, it is actually based on its commercial purposes. So what we would like to see is that actually how we can see Islamic financial sources is identical to conventional financial sources in terms of financial resources. Of course, the way we manage it, the way we use it is going to be different because we have different values according to these resources. So what I would like to share with you is that how the strategies that we have been doing so far is how we can make the market work for the poor. Yeah, we have projects, for example, based on our collaboration with USAID, where there is an agricultural value chain project. It is financed from the private sector and the government of Indonesia and government of United States of America. And then we see that actually the example is in the coffee plantation. Yeah. So we provide technical assistance to the farmers. We let them grow the coffee with the best agricultural practice available in the world. It is an organic one. And then we link the farmers to the market. So based on this, actually the market is now understands that there are good quality coffee from Indonesia. And through this financial resources that we can provide from conventional sources, for example, this is growing very fast. Now, the company is now working with a local Sharia bank to finance this operation. And I think by the time we use this means of financial resources, that will be very good in terms of promoting SDGs. By promoting this project, for example, we can tap the problems with poverty alleviation because of the coffee farmers are usually very poor. And then I would like to go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is actually the social finance that we are doing as well, because we have productive zakat fund here. And the next slide, please. I'm sorry. The next slide, please. Yeah. Now, Islamic social finance sources and SDGs that we can share here is that actually based on the coffee market projects that I explained earlier, this actually the example why the farmers is helped, yeah, in promoting the coffees that they are planting. So now the project is expanding through other products such as rice, for example. So that's why So that's why it will attack the issues of SDGs in terms of food security. And if we go to this project, for example, PNPM is the community-based development project that the government has been working on since 2007. And it is an open menu, and it has been using lots of Islamic financial sources, especially from the Islamic Development Bank. And then what we have is that it is an open menu, and it attacks the problems of poverty alleviation, housing and water sanitation, health and education, and then it also helps in the past the peace process in Poso, Ambon, and Papua regions. Why I'm telling you about this peace process? Because the problems is with the inequality in these troubled areas. So we use this approach, the community-driven development approach to this troubled areas, and then through local economic activities, we really develop how the local people are now more engaged in the issues of poverty problems. Now, PNPM principles being applied in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the issues that I can share with you based on our more than 9 years experience of these community-driven development projects, we attack SDGs issues in no poverty, for example, zero hunger, decent work and economic growth, affordable and clean energy, peace and justice, partnership for the goals, health and education, water sanitation, and energy and gender equality. Now, how Islamic financial sources play in this project? First, from government sukuk. We raise project-based sukuk, and then Islamic Development Bank also give us loans for this. And then we also use private sector's funds. That is from their zakat, that is from their charity. So these are the three resources of combined resources that we can use to finance this project. So this is only an example how Indonesia is doing with the Islamic financial resources to promote the SDG goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to share with our audience and our panelists, when we are talking about sustainable development, what does it mean in details a little bit? It's an integration between the economic development, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability. The development goals itself, considering the present and the future needs. So from our distinguished panelists here, if you can share with us your views when we are talking about the SDG 2030, which consists of 17 goals and 169 targets. This seems to be very challenging. What's your expectation about the role of Islamic finance that can be played achieving the SDG? In general, we will not go in details. We can start with Dr. Jamila.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me start by thanking IDB for inviting me today for this very interesting session. I think the simple and short answer is yes, Islamic social finance or Islamic finance can play a very important role in actually addressing some of the aspirations of the SDGs, particularly if you look at the ones that are targeting reduction in poverty, goals 1 and 2, very straightforward, goal 10 on equality and goal 16. But I think broadly, if we look at the SDGs, it's really the 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. So for me, it's not a question of whether Islamic finance is able to do that, because I think the time has come for it to play that role. But I think I was really impressed by your presentation is you really hit on the critical issues, on the issue of transparency, governance, real, clear frameworks on how you then engage at a global level. And the other thing, of course, is really a better advocacy and understanding of what it actually means to use Islamic finance in the context of SDGs. But I just said one more thing. You can't have sustainable development without actually addressing some of the crisis drivers that will actually erode your development goals. So we're actually living in a very difficult time right now where we have the highest, increasing rates of conflict and non-peace in the world. And, against an ambitious goal of actually wanting to have sustainable development. So I think, Islamic finance actually has the properties, is a right instrument to address those 5 Ps, but more than that, it has the moral and social validity to actually play a very important role. So I'd love to expand on that later.
Dr. Tonj, if you can share with us your views, especially the global financial system facing a lot of challenges since 2008 and since the crisis, and still I think we are suffering and facing a lot of challenges. So how can Islamic finance complement the efforts given to support the SDGs in the future?
Let me answer the question in 2 phases, because I think there are 2 aspects of it. Of course, one is related to the financial sector crisis and the importance of Islamic finance, and that could play also in addressing many of the issues raised by the crisis, during the crisis. As Ishrat mentioned already, some of those issues that clearly relate to Islamic finance's advantages over conventional finance. But before going there, I think one thing that I want to raise is very important, because when we talk about the SDGs, they are very high level, very big goals. Everyone agrees with those goals. It's even in the Quran, as Mr. Muhammad Ali mentioned this morning. So, they are there, and there is a lot many people are trying to do. But when you look at the root causes of these issues, it is basically related to how to create a better world and how to address the development issues, the food security, etc., through what? One major problem to me is the issue of unemployment, which ties into also the terrorist activities all over the world, because if a person is unemployed, then they have no future, no hope, then they become radicalized. On the other hand, if you are in a situation where you are not able to find a job, then what do? Who helps you? And these are the things that has not so far in a very holistic way in the discussion about the SDGs. And coming from where I'm coming from, which is the World SME Forum, I think one of the main answers to job creation is related to supporting the SMEs development. I can talk about it later because I want to answer your question now. But this is something to put also in the context which we need to discuss further. Now, regarding the crisis, when you go back to 2007, when this whole started in the United States, the reasons for the crisis were basically related to excessive borrowing in the real estate market, and then the development of structured products which are not based on real assets, and the expansion of these products in such a way that everything, all the junk, could be then covered under those products. And thirdly, they were not properly regulated and supervised. As a result of that, this spread to the Europe, and then to other parts of the world in the form of lower demand and an impact on the real sector, which is very negative because the demand goes down. Where do they sell their products? Islamic finance has not been principles of Islamic finance. One is risk sharing. Second is you have to have a real asset to back your lending or investment. And if it was the case at that time for the conventional finance as well, then you wouldn't have this problem, because when you look at the problem, most of the hit came from these structured products, and it's not allowable in Islamic finance. So long story short, if you have Islamic finance, you wouldn't have probably the crisis that we had at that time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Going to Mr. Edie, as we know, Islamic finance in the last 40 years has been dominated by mainstream finance, i.e. banking, capital markets, and driving the economy itself. As we can see today, the position of the Islamic finance, which is by design, 80% remain with the Islamic banks. All the players in these segments are mainly motivated by commercial values. Based on the Indonesian experience in Islamic social finance and financial inclusion, do you think that these two areas can be further developed and take a lead to address the SDG, which is the same question has been, or same given in the presentation of Dr. Bonki. So can you share with us from your experience and the Indonesian experience, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be a panelist in this IDB seminar. So actually, if we would like to know about is there any role of the Islamic finance, to achieve the SDGs goal, we have to think about the two aspects. Yeah. As you know that mostly, if you're talking about for instance, that the poverty, okay, but the poverty, there are two aspects how to deal with the poverty, how to alleviate the poverty. The first is education, and the second thing is about the availability of capital. Yeah. So maybe two aspects should be should be link each other. Yeah. For instance, that the poverty is not just alone poverty, how to alleviate poverty, but poverty itself. This the issue is related to the productivity, to creativity, and to hunger, yeah, and etc. And also the education skill, etc. So in this education, for instance, that if you're talking about the education, it's not just the formal education, but also the training skill, yeah, how to increase the capability to run the business, etc. But the skill itself not enough. Yeah, if you can also find other sources how to make realize that their business is gonna be operate. So the other factor is the availability of the capital. In this case, I have three proposals for that. Yeah. The first is, with regard to financing. Yeah, financial inclusion is not just like to, providing money to the people to support their business, but also the second thing is about how to accumulate the wealth. Yeah, accumulate the wealth, meaning that the poor peoples, although they're poor, but they're still creative. They still increase, the income, etc. So we have to also in our policy, we create like product how to develop the saving habits of the people. Yeah, we introduce a kind of like insurance, micro insurance, and also through the pawn shop, etc. Yeah, they try to use their own property to be used as a financing their activities. And the last thing is about how to educate the people. They know about the risks of the business. Yeah. So we introduce kind of the insurance, yeah, to them, how they can use, for instance, that their livestock, yeah. And we make like a certificate for livestock, and the livestock, the certificate can be used as a collateral, quote unquote, to the bank or to the financial company, and they will issue credit or issue financing, yeah, to them. Yeah. So at least three aspects. Yeah. If we say about the how to reduce to alleviate the poverty. The first is how to financing, and the second how to accumulate the wealth, and the third thing is about the risk management aspect. Yeah.
Thank you. Facing the reality today, and since the SDG has been launched in last September 2015, and the needs of a global finance every year equal to $1 trillion to support implementing the SDG. And as a size of the Islamic finance industry today, standing at 2 trillion, industry by design, as we can say. Can you see the Islamic finance role in implementing the needs and complement the global financial system to support the $1 trillion every year needed to support implementation of SDG, especially that still, as we know, Islamic finance system has two wings, which is the commercial wing and the social one. And we didn't see yet that Islamic finance in the last 40 years that active and has a real impact that we can measure in the area of social finance. Yes, we have good example. Yes, we have good models, but it's not yet, especially we are living in countries having the highest poverty rate in the world. So if Dr. Tanj can share with us your views on that.
Well, you know, as you said, the needs are big for achieving the SDGs, because $1 trillion is a lot of money. And I don't think that all of it is anyway expected from the Islamic finance industry. The issue is that I think, first of all, we need to understand where we are on the Islamic finance industry ourselves, because then we can, if we understand ourselves clearly, then we can talk about what we can do for others. What are our needs first? Because Islamic finance, although it improved a lot during the past years, I don't call myself an expert. I'm unfortunately not at that level yet, but I've been involved in Islamic finance for almost 15 years now. When I was in the World Bank, we created the Istanbul Center, etc. But still, I'm a modest follower of Islamic finance. But what I have seen as an issue is that the problems that we were discussing 15 years ago in Islamic finance are not solved yet, to be very frank, okay? So I think we need still to come together, and I have said this before many times, I feel bad about it, repeating myself, and have a coordinated approach in addressing some of the issues that Islamic finance has been facing and will be facing tomorrow if we don't address them. One of them is related to, for example, the standardization issue. You know, every part of the, geographically speaking, of the world has a different interpretation and implementation of Islamic finance. There is no standards, and that's a major issue, because one product, good here, is not a good product in another place. Now, we're talking about financing SDGs. Let's assume we issue a scoop in one part of the world to support one SDG, which would be very useful. Then one jurisdiction says, no, this is haram. What do you do now? You know, so I think that these are the things that, first of all, we need to first put some order in our house. Then, yes, we have enormous potential within the Islamic finance industry, because funding is there, okay? As you suggested, and which is very correct, most of the countries who need improvement identified in SDGs are the countries who are Islamist, mostly, unfortunately, I should say. Inclusiveness is an issue in our countries again. When you look at it, inclusivity of women, inclusivity of youth, inclusivity of SMEs, again, I bring it to my topic, are a major problem when compared to other countries. So, yes, there is a lot that we can do, but first I think we need to solve the problems that we have been talking about for many, many years now.
Thank you. Talking about problems, I think this is what we're saying, the reality that we have to face today, and we have to challenge ourselves and not to wait for longer time because will take from us our advantage that we have today as Islamic finance. We are talking for the last 40 years that we are attached to the real economy activity, but in reality today, the industry is driven more than 60% by that. So I think to attach ourselves to real economy, we have to have our industry to reshape our industry to be driven by equity and risk sharing. Going back to the four priorities area of the financing, for financing SDG, let me to share with you what has been written in the SDG launched by United Nations. First, investment flows will have to come increasingly from private sources. Because now we discover that all government NDBs will not be able to fill the gap or the needs to support implementation of SDG. Domestic resources mobilization can play a key role in achieving SDGs, which is we are missing in most of our countries. Official development agencies must be blended with private sources or crowd in other funding sources. Number four, MDBs will have to take up a different role, a convening role and providing technical assistance and financing to achieve the development goals. I think with these four priorities, in our position as Islamic finance industry today, are we ready for that? I will leave the floor. I will give the floor for, it's a free. It's not allocated to any of you, but it's need a brave heart. Somebody can talk about this. We need to hear from you, if you can comment on that. Are we ready to meet the needs of the four priorities to support financing the SDGs as Islamic finance industry, and what we need? What's our prescriptions of today to be able to contribute to the implementation of SDGs? Sorry to take you to the reality and face the reality instead of dreaming big and think beyond what we can implement and what we can do. Please.
Yeah, if I can share, actually the role of the multilateral development banks, international development banks, is actually a lot that they can do to help work with the governments on supporting the agendas of SDGs achievement. But first, what they need to do is align themselves with the government priorities. Yeah, because most of the time when I speak with my colleagues from some of the African countries or even South Asian countries, this is actually the elements that needs to be improved, the agenda of the government. Then I believe that actually based on the Indonesian experience that the government has really to design well what they are going to do with achievements of the sustainable development goals. Here actually the MDBs would be able to play, again as you said, providing technical assistance, not only in SDG planning, but how we deliver the project into a good practice according to international standards. The second thing is that through the triangular cooperation, South-South cooperation, if you may want to say that, this is actually what I just explained earlier with our project on community-driven development project. I think Dr. Salvas Alpai, your chief economist, informed me 5-6 years ago that the model has been replicated in more than 21 countries. So it is now not surprising if the model is being applied in Afghanistan and in Iraq. But the issue is that through this triangular cooperation that actually we can share, we can give them what is not to do and what is to be done to make the program a success. The third one is that actually technical training on how you manage and design the SDG projects itself. And then the fourth one is that to make the Islamic Sharia financial institutions work, then you really need to work on that infrastructure. Because most of the time, okay, we have zakat program, but it is not integrated. It is not well organized. The governance is the big issue. So while there is an agenda on the SDGs one, but we should also work on the financial infrastructure as well. I think that's what I think we should go forward from now. Thank you.
Dr. Jamila.
Yeah, I just want to really, reinforce what you said about the establishment of standards. I think for the longest time in the field of Islamic, especially particularly in the social arena of finance, we have no real evidence that is clear to us on a global level on the power and the potential. We know the potential, but we don't have the evidence and the data. So I think once we actually have a standardization of how we look at the different elements of social finance, it helps us. The second thing is I'm an incurable optimist. I'm going to just be myself, that I see everything as half full. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation, that we would even look at an instrument like Islamic finance as something that would actually address some of the global issues that we have right now. Yes, the market share of Islamic finance is not a massive one. It's 2 billion out of, I think it's 8 billion currently, but it's significant. Yes, 31 out of 33 conflicts in the world are in the OIC countries. So there's a real potential for Islamic finance to play the role. Now, how can we actually bring it to a level that people actually want to invest in Islamic finance? And I think this is where innovation has to take place. I think if I can give a couple of examples. One is, I've used this so many times, of the vaccination programs for children, where the Gavi Alliance, together with IFFI, with World Bank, established a sukuk, which was a $500 million sukuk, was 1.4 times oversubscribed, and second issuance of 200 million. Now, this was the first time, basically, the world sort of took a step back, and I was in the UN at the time, and in saying, gosh, this instrument actually does work, and you can actually get people to invest in it. Now, 75% of the investment was from the Middle East. How do we make Islamic finance actually attractive to the wider audience, so that you can actually take it to scale? Now, the other element, if I can give another example, is actually on education. Now, we know that we will have a lost generation in Syria if we don't start looking at education. Gordon Brown will be launching his education fund and a few other major initiatives to look at education. Why isn't the Muslim world looking at how Islamic finance can work either through sukuk or hybrid with wakaf to address education? Why not bring in the private sector, the technology world, to invest in virtual schools, for example, that can actually provide in the interim the knowledge and the education that's required for children, and as well as virtual, so that when they actually go back to wherever they came from and they've been displaced, they don't lose that, the years of education. And finally, I think, if we look at risks, and you're talking about poverty reduction and leaving no one behind, and zero hunger. As I speak, El Nino is hitting many parts of Africa, and people are now not only eating, but they're also not going to school because they're too weak, because they're not eating enough food. So you'll never be able to achieve sustainable development goals if we don't address some of these critical issues. Why aren't we using takaful, for example, as an insurance tool? To look at risk insurance, taking the examples of Swiss Re or Zurich or Munich Re, on how can you turn an Islamic tool like insurance and maybe link that to either zakat or wakaf that can then be applied to countries that have these risks. And risks are now known. They're not sudden. There's enough knowledge and science and that can actually tell us when these risks will be happening. So I think having a much more anticipatory, innovative approach to Islamic financial tools and linking it with the commercial world, I think will help it a lot to address some of these issues.
What you are mentioning here is very interesting, because you describe the body of the Ummah or Islamic finance industry, that it's a very weak and have a lot of pains everywhere. Educations, human rights, healthcare, many things you are talking. So how come to have a body with all these pains? And we are talking about shared prosperity and contributing to the implementation of the SDGs. Can you share with us, Dr. Tanj, you are always, make me, feel happy always with your smile. And you are too much optimistic, so I'm sorry to bring that question to you, but I would like to hear from you as an, from your views, how we can take us to that, ourselves to that level, that we can contribute and be an effective in implementing the SDGs in the coming 15 years.
Thank you, first of all, for your kind compliment. I am an optimist, but I am also a realist. And you touched a lot of very sore points in your description. I think we should be realistic. What we can do is first of all limited to what our abilities are. So be it education, be it job creation, be it issues related to security, etc., are limited to our ability. If we want to address these issues, then first of all, we should take stock of where we are. And we should also have a holistic approach in these things. The main problem is, if we go by government, then political ambitions come into play. Political priorities come into play and they go above SDGs, or they become pick and choose and where to show the political benefits so that they can be re-elected, etc. I can talk like this because I have no political ambitions. So, that's one problem, I think, that needs to be addressed globally, which cannot be, because human nature is as such that you cannot change this. So what do we do then? Then we should take it, I think, one level up. And we should address this issue in a more global way, where Islamic finance is obviously a part of this whole equation. Now, during the discussions with the G20 and B20, which is now supposed to be the body who is taking over most of these important issues, we were involved together with Ibrahim Bey here last year during the G20 Turkish leadership, as well as we are also involved this year as the World SME Forum with the Chinese leadership. Am I very much satisfied with the discussions with the bodies, political bodies, both in G20 and B20? It is not where I want it to be. However, what is good about these fora, for example, is that there is the opportunity to raise the issues that we are discussing here with those political bodies which represent 80% of the powers in the world, be it the population, be it the economic growth, etc. And they are the ones, if we can push them to the point that can help us to push our agenda together with us. So when last year again, thanks to our government, we pushed Islamic finance into the G20 agenda the first time in its history. And we are still trying to do this year through different task forces. For example, within the SME task force, we are saying that, okay, why don't we also consider what Islamic finance can do to address the issues related to SMEs, which then address the issues related to job creation, unemployment, etc. Can be done. So my proposal would be to be more organized as the Islamic community and to be more focused in the direction. One thing that I don't see happening throughout the years that I was involved is that Islamic finance community or Islamic community at large is a bit closed and inward-looking. I think we should connect more with the West and whoever we call West or East or whatever, but people who are outside this community, because unless they understand us and unless we have this shared goals, okay, then we will not be able to achieve what we want to achieve. I very much believe in synergy. And synergy can be created through talking and through having common goals. So long story short, yes, we can have a big role as Islamic finance community, okay, in achieving the MDGs and achieving the SDGs and achieving the 2030 goals. But it needs cooperation.
Thank you very much for the very positive and encouraging opinion. If you allow for me, we can now open the questions. MashaAllah, I can see a lot of hands. So, can we start with we will go from the right to the left. So, can we start with our sister here?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I want to ask, do you think increasing Islamic financial literacy through educational system, formally or informally, can help increase Islamic finance role to achieve SDGs? This can be done, for example, like having partnership, like giving education of Islamic finance through in the mosque. Like
Your name, and to whom you address the question, please.
I asked to all of the panelists whether this one
Choose
is
one.
actually, oh, okay, maybe Mr. Punki. Yeah.
Please.
I cannot hear that.
Can you repeat the question again, because it's not clear for us? Can you put the microphone close to your...
Okay.
Yeah, you can.
Do you think increasing Islamic financial literacy through educational system, formally or informally, can help increase Islamic finance role to achieve SDGs, like having partnership with the mosque, or for example, like starting from junior high school or senior high school, we can introduce Islamic economics to them, and by the time they graduate, they can have this option where to, for example, borrow the money, have this financing, etc. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Dr. Jamila, we'll start with Dr. Jamila, please.
I think that's a really good and important question. Absolutely, I agree with that. Financial literacy in all forms should be introduced to students. I think that this is something that is quite lacking in many educational systems. So I think early introduction, early sensitization through the education system, both formal and informal, is important. I think that's a straightforward yes for me.
Dr. Bonki?
Oh, yes, I agree with what you just mentioned. But I would like to add also that maybe it is also better to think about the family, especially for the people in the rural areas. So what we are trying to promote is that how we can provide financial inclusion training or whatever literacy program, financial literacy program, to families, starting with the women and the children in the family, how they use the household finances to support SDGs, not give the money to the children for whatever snacks, whatever unnecessary things that we always see every day in our life. This is very important because one day a city banker from Singapore told me that actually I know Indonesian poor farmers live from debt to debt, from season to season. The reason is most of the time, for example, because of the financial illiteracy. One of the problem is providing snacks to the children. They don't know how to use their additional income for productive investment, for example. So this kind of things is good. Of course, in addition to what you just mentioned, providing education to students at the school from the very early stage up to the higher level. Thank you very much.
Please, Mr.
Yes, thank you. This, I agree with the proposal because you know that in our program, actually, as you know that the OJK have to function, I mean to twin objective, yeah, not only prudential aspect but also the education aspect. In that aspect, we really want to encourage the the industry, yeah, like the banking or the insurance company. It's not only dealing with the customer or the debtor just because of the commercial motive. So we attract them also to educate people. So we encourage them to educate people, to know that the line of business and other product. And after the, the collaboration between the industry and with the candidate, I mean the client, yeah, become a client. So there will be something like take and give, yeah, not just getting a profit from the people, but also they educate people and to better know about the line of business and product of the financial.
Thank you. Other question? We have two questions here.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My question is related to the pricing of the products of financial services. If you have new products, only one word, you must be better and cheaper. So that's the key if anybody want to sustain in this world. Otherwise, I think you can live, but not forever, for example. So I would like to know from sister or brothers there who experience, what is your pricing products, not only in the microfinance, but the Islamic banking as a whole. Is it cheaper than our counterpart, the conventional bank, or more expensive? Because we are here challenged to prove Allah said that it is, you will be okay if you follow me, Allah said, in this life and in the later life. If you cannot prove that, or you follow the capitalist mindset, I don't think Islamic will be, because the money is everywhere. If you do not follow the capitalist market ways of thinking. Thank you.
It's a very emotional questions. Personally, I disagree with what you are saying, but I will give the floor to our panelists if somebody wants to answer this.
Yes, if we discuss about the pricing, maybe you have to know about the economic of scale of the Islamic finance. Yeah. If the economic of scale is still low, so how can create? I mean, they create the lower price. That's why I think like we attract them to merge among banking, for instance, and among insurance company to get certain scale of the economic, so they can provide, the cheaper cost for that. And also the government right now try to lower down the interest rate, by maybe for the first time just put subsidize for the interest rate for the availability of money to subsidize to the not only to the conventional but also to Sharia banking also. But at the end, maybe the Sharia also have to provide the lower rate of cost, something like that. Yeah, because if the massive for lowering down the interest rate in the country, so the Sharia business also will follow it. Yeah, I think that's my.
I think our problem that we are judging an industry which is more than 99% of the characteristic of the industry today is commercially driven. So we cannot apply what's supposed to be on the social part to the commercial part. What we have to say here, if we're talking from commercial driven aspects, we have to be at service oriented and to provide good service to the clients and our segment that we are targeting. If you want to talk about the cost of funding, Card Hasan, the Zakat contribution, the Awqaf, which is can have a social return, commercial return, and also support restoring the dignity of human beings or Muslims. I think we have to concentrate more in developing the social finance part, which is we are in a bad needs for the last 40 years. We are in a bad need, and this will be our key challenges in the coming future, years. We will go to another questions here. There is another question. Yes, yes, please. The microphone, please, yeah.
Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am from IEP2, International Association for Public Participation. I would like to ask the question to Tan Sri Dr. Jamila and Dr. Pungki Sumadi. First, I would like to know, just curious, yes, some information from you, the panelists, especially maybe from your countries. As we know that 15 years ago, yeah, since 2000, we had MDGs, Millennium Development Goals. Do you have some good best practice to share with us, especially in poverty reduction? This first. Based on this condition, or based on this best practice, we can move forward. What is the target of your countries and also maybe IDBs to achieve the SDGs? So far, many people talking about SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, with ambitious targets. Yeah, you know, we have 17 goals of SDGs. It's not easy. It's not the small goal. It's a big goal. I think it's a good idea if you have, if you convey to us the good target and also the specific target. For example, IDB and also Islamic development countries, Islamic countries, I mean, have the specific goals. For example, maybe Malaysia, yeah, Islamic banking would like to contribute for 20% of poverty reduction. Indonesia also like that. Islamic banking would like to contribute to 30% in poverty reduction, nutrition improvement, something like that.
Thank you very much.
That's more focused and more clear than you are talking about the ambitious goals. I'm just curious.
Thank you.
Tell us. Thank you.
Thank you. Before giving the floor to our distinguished panelists, just to answer your question about IDB and the contribution, we can, inshallah, we can publish and share with you the 10 years strategy for IDB group. We was able to map our mission priorities within our 10 years strategy, including all our strategic initiatives and the strategic objectives to the SDGs, the 17 SDGs. Honestly speaking, we know how we are going to implement it in the coming 10 years towards 15 out of the 17. And the reason that SDG number 12 and 16, it's more attached to the developed country more than the developing country. It's a very high level of achievement. I will give the floor to Chancellor Dr. Jamila and also Dr. Ponji to answer as the question.
Mr. Moderator, could you please give me what is the highlight of the question, because I couldn't hear it clearly.
Okay. He's asking about how we can Islamic finance, or an example. He's comparing between the Millennium Development Goals and if they achieved what's supposed to achieve, and the ambitious giving to the SDG, if we are behind what's supposed to be achieved in the Millennium. So they are talking about something in reality, what we can do and how we can contribute to that.
Well, I'll try to answer you, but I'm not a financial person. Neither have I lived in my country for more than 7 years, but I will try. I'm still Malaysian. I think for the MDGs, I think we can be proud as Malaysians that we actually managed to achieve almost all the, in fact, all the SDGs, except for MDGs. And particularly, if I can highlight a couple of things, is the poverty reduction and also maternal mortality, which Malaysia has one of the lowest maternal mortality in the world. And that's partly because of policies that target, primary health care, provision of health care to all, education, and so forth. Now, whether or not these were directly implicated by Islamic finance, I have no idea, so I can't answer you on that. But I'm going to come back to the second part, because I sense a sense of cynicism in your question. Of course, there are ambitious goals. If they're not ambitious goals, then why have goals? If we can't push ourselves out of our comfort zone to want something better and what everyone deserves, then we are not being good citizens, good global citizens. I think it's important to have ambitious goals and to set high targets, because only then will you really push yourselves. Now, these goals were agreed upon by heads of states of all the member states of the United Nations. So it's your government, my government, who agreed and signed on the dotted lines. I think our role as citizens, as bankers, as doctors, as educationists, is to make sure that we do our part to try to achieve those goals. We may achieve them, we may not. So I think, the question of relevance of the goals is the train has left the station.
I think, yes, I can support that, because we have been created, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us as a human beings with ambitious goals that we have to develop and to build the earth. So I think this is one of the main driven ambitious goal that we are always following. So the SDG is not new for human beings, value-added needs, and also to be to build the earth. So, Dr. Bonghi, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I think from MDG's experience, I'm more on the development business. I'm not a financial expert here. But from the MDG goals, actually, Indonesia achieved most of them, more than 95%. I think 4 or 5 goals that we can admit, for example, the maternal mortality, pneumonia, or things like that, also malaria also. So that's in the past. But in the future, what I see the potential that we can do is actually working harder, especially on the private sectors with the non-government organizations to hand in hand working with the government on how we can improve delivery of the SDG programs or projects that we can do. So by doing so, for example, there is this is an example of what we are now trying to do is from the Sharia Wakaf Fund land. In Gatot Subroto area, about 15 minutes from here, there is a huge mixed-use real estate building being constructed on Wakaf land. It was, for example, used for mosque, if I'm not mistaken. So the developer is now trying to build the constructive high-rise, mixed-use high-rise building, and the land value has increased more than 50 times. Can you imagine actually what is the amount of money that can be collected for distribution to the poor people surrounding the area, and then be used professionally using a better targeting program, better organization program to attack some of the SDGs issues there. So this is only one example. There is another one in Tanah Abang area. But if the government can work, for example, with Badan Wakaf Indonesia to work on this issue, make them more professional, make them more better targeting things like that, then I think we can see that it is going to be a better way to achieve SDGs. Of course, this is in addition with what government has been doing. So there are lots of opportunities that we can do, but again, the challenge is how we would like to do it ourselves. How we can do better things with international best practice available around internet, for example. As I agree with you, Doctor, that actually, yes, if we want to learn how we can do better things, then of course everything is inshallah possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last questions. So I will take the question here, brother. Yeah, please. And I will come back to you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, thank you very much to all the panelists for a very articulative session today. So I try to make down into the context of our topic today, which is role of Islamic financing in achieving SDGs. Okay, I can see 2 points here. One is Islamic financing. So when we talk about Islamic financing, I think we got to focus on two components, whereby Islamic finance, which are very quite sophisticated right now, especially in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Middle East. And secondly, on the Islamic social finance, which is still at early stage, which we really focus on. So these are two components we need to have integration, so that at the end of the day, we can see we can achieve to SDGs. Because when we look at the SDGs, we are focusing on not really on Islamic finance, but I would think it's more on Islamic social finance. So they got to come together, to integrate in some ways, to cooperate each other, so that we can not far from the SDGs. Because as we rightly hear in this room, SDGs, the mission and vision is very, very, very high, and probably we need to have our own tool to come to that level. So my question, one, I have two questions, moderator, if you don't mind. My first question...
Depend on the question and the answer needed.
Very short.
Yeah.
Very short question. My first question, what is the right stakeholders for this initiative? Because we need to think about the integration between Islamic finance and Islamic social finance. It's not that easy, I know, because as far as Islamic finance, we already have our dedicated regulators, which is Central Bank, and also Security Commission, for example. But for Islamic social finance, I think I hardly find one for that. First. Second, do you think we need to intervene for the SDGs? Because we need to think about something very, very, very focused in this, because we need to have something thinking framework for our Islamic finance per se, because we have Maqasid Sharia perspective. So probably we need to think about this thinking framework in the middle, so that we can intervene in the middle, so that we can see this Maqasid Sharia as a tool to achieve the higher level of SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you. We will take the other questions, and then we will close the final questions here, please. Because we are running out of time, and we want to conclude and close the session, if you don't mind. Please.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Zainul Barnur, Vice Chairman of Indonesian National Board of Zakat. Thanks a lot for all presents given by the presenters just now. I just want to quote what has been written here, that the major areas of contribution of Islamic finance is to enhance financial inclusion and share prosperity. As a matter of fact, and we have been discussing that a lot, that up to the present moment, the financial institutions in OIC countries have not been really achieved their role to alleviate poverty, mainly in the OIC countries. Yesterday afternoon or morning and today, the presenters have been really discussing and telling us about the power, the potential of zakat and wakaf. My question is, will it be the burden of each country to collect wakaf and zakat in the country? And would it not be also the function of IDB to take a role to increase the collection of zakat and wakaf in each country? To the best of my knowledge, please correct me if I'm wrong, IDB has what you call international awqaf funds, which is chaired by our brother Dr. Adil Sharif, and you have also AFIF. But what do IDB does so far is to finance any project through awqaf funds that collected by IDB, but to the best of my knowledge again, that IDB has not been really enforcing or advising all OIC country to really increase the collection of zakat and wakaf in each of the country. Just recently, the National Board of Zakat of Indonesia has signed an MOU with IDB, what we call as the pilot project of zakat contribution to the economic community development. My question is, or my appeal to IDB, why did IDB just try to collect the zakat and wakaf and to use it to any country, but no, not to make or to establish a unit in IDB to assist all of the country of OIC to develop and to increase the zakat and wakaf collection. IDB has made a good survey back to 10 years ago that the potential of zakat of Indonesians Muslim people not less than 21 billion US dollars. But we cannot really achieve that amount of zakat, and we just achieve it less than 2% of it. So what I would like to ask IDB in this case, that for you then, not only to make or to run an organization like that zakat and wakaf passively, just to collect it and then to distribute it, but instead you try then to increase your role to
Very
all
clear,
of us.
very
Thank
clear.
you.
Thank you very much. It's great questions, and we have, inshallah, a great answer on it. I will give the floor first to our distinguished panelist, and then I will close, because it looks like the whole question is for IDB, so I will take the role to answer. So, democracy, I will give first the room for our panelist, and I have a long answer for you, so we can stay with together. Please, Dr.
Well, I think, first of all, I really like your question. I just wanted to say it's really important, because I think zakat is underutilized, or rather we don't know. This is the problem with zakat, we don't know, because not all countries have institutions that collect zakat. You know, and I'm very much for an independent international zakat organization that actually, really can be a facilitator, can be a capacity developer, can be a convener, and really have a transparent way of, committing zakat to the most needy. So I really like your question, so I hope IDB gives you a good answer. I just want to touch on what you said, Saudara Yusri. I think Islamic social finance is the one we need to really focus our attention on to develop. I think, setting standards, having clear policies and clear frameworks that will help us globally to look at it, not as, at national level is critical, but we also have to step up one level as 57 countries to come together and think of a global picture, because there are countries in the OIC region that don't really, have the same challenges and can actually play a very important role in supporting other OIC countries. But beyond that, I also look at Islamic social finance as a fantastic tool of marketing in a very xenophobic world. I think that if we look at the role of wakaf and sukuk, it's not limited to use in Muslim communities. And I think that, I think selfishly, I want, Islam to be branded in a very positive way in the eyes of people who are critical of it. And the third thing is, if you look at zakat, wakaf, and all the transmissions, and I think I spoke about this yesterday, that a lot of countries that are, lower development, least developed, or who have serious development issues, are very dependent on remittances. And remittances now are being scrutinized more and more, so much so that, there will be a serious problem when, counterterrorism laws actually limit remittances going to these countries. So I think having an international body that can, like, IDB led with the World Bank, with other entities, to really set up this, the standards and the transparency, so that, it will not be questioned. I think that's really important. If I may, since I have the microphone, what we haven't really talked about is the lack of global leadership. I think, we really need leadership for this to happen. I think that, we're hiding behind the fact that we can't achieve the SDGs without good political leadership. We can't achieve any leadership, any of the goals that we want without leadership at all levels. And I think, I want to just, Dr. Eddie, you mentioned just now the 7 habits of that Stephen Covey's 7 habits of leadership. I just want to share with you that it's so interesting that you raised this. A couple of years ago, I was approached by Stephen Covey's best friend, and when he died, he told his friend before he died that, I want you to continue the legacy of what I have done with the 7 habits. Now, this man came to me and he said, I can produce for you a $20 cell phone and put the 7 habits on the phone, and then, you know, you can distribute this to young people in poor countries, in underdeveloped countries, so that before they get any, you know, money or anything, they have to do this online training of the 7 habits. I thought it was so clever. Yet, when I was trying to get people to get excited about this, people didn't really get excited. And I think that, you know, isn't this something that the Islamic world can use, you know, to really bring, you know, young people, and I really focus on young people because I think they are the solution for us. And again, coming to Islamic social finance and young people, there are many initiatives already doing e-infaq, e-wakaf, e-zakat, all the electronic, all the apps. And I just want to end with one story that you may have seen it on social media, because I met these people, right? In Syria, in the streets of Lebanon, you know, there's this man who was selling ballpoint pens to raise money for his children to eat. And just through social media, in 1 week, they raised $190,000, and he was able to set up a small business. So we've got to get out of our comfort zone. It's not conventional thinking now about finance. We've got to be able to look into the real role of technology and how you crowdsource, and in the same way, sell the concept of Islamic social finance as a tool for the future to solve many of the problems of the Ummah. And there.
Thank you very much. I think we are running out of time. We have 6 minutes. So using the democracy and to be a democratic moderator, I will take the 6 minutes to be able to answer the question, because it's very long. Just to comment on something which is raised by Brother Yusri here. I think we are missing in this ummah the right attitude and to implement the integrative thinking methodology to be able to sit on one table and have one solution for the industry. We are sitting in a different islands. Everybody consider himself, he's the leader. And he's...
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. I'm taking myself out of my role as a moderator here. But we have to be honest enough to face that. We need, I will give an example. Islamic infrastructure bodies, Secretary General, they don't sit together and talk about what they have to develop to serve the industry and the development of the industry. MDBs, they don't sit together to be able to work. Recently, because of the crisis and because what happened in the Middle East, everybody discovered that he cannot do it his own. Yeah. So everybody's coming now because of the needs. So what we are missing as Ummah, the attitude. Rasul ﷺ has came to وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And Dr. Jamila here mentioned something. We are not selling that for Muslims. We are selling that for human beings. To be able to achieve and to restore the dignity of human beings, we have to work together. We have to forget not to be selfish enough that everybody is talking about how he has to achieve and how to succeed alone. We cannot do it alone. Nobody will do it alone. Going back to your question, because you was insisting and raising your hand, and I guess that the question will be given to me for IDB. I've been asked the question in March 2015 in Istanbul about the role of Islamic Development Bank in developing Islamic finance industry. At that time, I was too new to IDB because I'm a banker. I'm coming from private sector. So I was thinking how to answer that when I don't have the whole history of what IDB did. But I came as an outsider. I took myself outside of IDB hats. And I was thinking, as Islamic investment practitioners, can we imagine the Islamic finance industry without IDB in the last 40 years? This is the question I raised to the person who raised the questions about what IDB did. I will share with you what IDB doing in the last 40 years and continue doing as based on the mission and the vision of IDB Group, contributing and developing the social finance industry. IDB have a fund called Solidarity Fund. Today with $2.3 billion just for poverty alleviations. Nothing to do more than this in the member countries. Another work fund of $1 billion contributing also to all social return and social finance and support the disadvantages and poor. We have something, a very unique model called ABIF, which is you mentioned here. ABIF, it's one of the unique investment fund supporting developing of income generating awqaf assets worldwide, not only in the member countries. We have a project, it's a fund with $76 million paid up capital, running 1.6 billion awqaf, income generating awqaf assets worldwide, from Australia to USA, to Europe, to Africa, to Asia, across 33 countries. We have 55 income generating awqaf projects supporting the needs of the Muslim community worldwide. And I wish if private sector, and we are inviting private sectors, we have 15 investors only in this fund. And now we are promoting that, and we are marketing these models to private sector to take the leads and to put hand in hand with IDB to be able to make it billions, trillions of dollars, because this industry and these sectors from this industry, side of the industry, social finance industry, not yet tapped well and probably to be able to contribute to the needs of the human being. It's not only for Muslims. So I can share with you in details what we have in IDB and what we are proud to do, because it's a very unique model. Just to share with you, this fund for running for the last 14 years with a zero default, achieving three things: reviving of Sunnat al-Waqf, Ihya Sunnat al-Waqf, and it was the first time in my life last year to know there is something called Sunnat al-Waqf. Second, making a financial return for the investors. Third, making a social return for the community, Muslim community worldwide. We are very proud to share with you our experience in IDB, and we want to confirm with and to assure you that IDB, in their vision and their mission in the last 40 years and continue till end of the life, inshallah, will continue contributing to the social finance and the social return and ensuring contributing and help to restore the dignity of the human beings, not only the Muslims. Thank you very much, and we appreciate your patience, and thank you very much for distinguished panelists. It was very, very interesting to hear from you and to share your experience with us. And thank you, and forgive us for missing any questions. And thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed Algebali. Honorable speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this ends of today's agenda. On behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to thank to all participants for attending the seminar and share your valuable contribution. We would like to apologize for any inconvenience arising from this event. Closing today's agenda, we would like to invite all participants to enjoy lunch. May I inform you that lunch is served in dining area at Hall A. Again, in Hall A. On that note, please enjoy your lunch and allow me to bid you all a good day. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.